expectation about when they're likely to be able to phase into the scheme. Now, you might have a question about, well, what happens to them in the meantime? So there is an agreement between all governments who are participating in the trials that existing government programs or continuity of support will continue for people up to the point they actually come in and have a plan. So please don't be concerned that if you have people who you are caring for, who you think may well be eligible, their support will not fall away on the 1st of July. So arrangements will stay in place until individuals actually come into the scheme. So how do you find out? So this is a good question. How do you find out if somebody might be eligible? You can go onto our website right now, probably Google it on your phone if you want to, go onto our website right now, and there is an electronic, very simple form to fill in called My Access Checker. So it's been set up for ACT residents, so you can go in, have a look at that, put in a few questions which really talks about the impact of a person's disability on their daily functioning. And at the end of that form, which really literally only takes about 5 minutes to do because I did it for my son who has a permanent disability, you will get a little sentence that says, it seems like you might be able to access the scheme. Here's your reference number, and it'll give you a five-digit, and so a combination of numbers and letters reference number. You need to keep that because that reference number attaches to the information that you have put in the electronic form, and it will say, please contact us after the 1st of July. So the reason it says that is we don't still know who's actually going to come in on the 1st of July, but nevertheless, it's a useful exercise to go through. So, you know, go on, have a try. Even if you just make up a fictional person or somebody you've worked with in the past, you'll get an idea of what that information is seeking. Yep. But we have a wide gateway. So how many of you have had experience in the past with programs that have had all these things that you need, all these hoops you have to jump through before you even get to the front door? So, you know, you have to have a doctor's this and a, you know, blah that and a specialist this and a, you know, assessment this. No. You guys actually are part of our front door. I don't know whether you knew that. But anybody that you're working with that you suspect may be eligible for the scheme, you can refer them to the scheme. You can sit with them and do the My Access Checker in your office or in their home if you want to. If somebody is even just wanting to chat to somebody, to have kind of a preliminary discussion with somebody about what do I do, you can do that. So you actually are part of our front door, and as such, because you're in direct contact with people with disability, you are going to be very important in the scheme of things. So ACT residents, oh, that says ACT residents, that should say ACT, anyway. And as I said before, there'll be a gradual intake, you know, just an orderly progression to make sure we bring everybody in a timely way. This is the skeleton, the sort of core of what the disability requirements are. So this is also really important. In order for somebody to access the scheme, and I'm going to talk just about the ACT now, people will need to be aged under 65, so that's really key. They'll need to be residing in the ACT before or on the 1st of July, so you can't just move in you know, on the 3rd of July and say, I'm here. I think you'll find most of your clients are already here anyway. You have to have a permanent disability, so we'll come back to that in a minute because some of you might be wondering, oh, what about people with a psychiatric illness where they're sick sometimes and not, but I'll talk about it in a minute. So a permanent disability, and the disability must have a significant impact on the way a person lives their everyday life. So I'll use my son as an example because he has a permanent disability. He has something called velocardiofacial syndrome. Have you heard of that? No, most people haven't. So it's a chromosomal disorder, but like many of those disorders, it's a spectrum disorder. And some children are very, very significantly impacted. Others, like my son, are more at the mild end. So his main effect is a mild intellectual disability. And he, for example, has a terrible sense of direction, among other things. But he does need help with some things. I doubt that he's going to be able to access support under the scheme. But it is permanent. So it needs to have a big impact on your everyday life and your ability to participate. And you are going to need supports for the rest of your life. We'll talk about early intervention in a minute because it does slightly alter the picture here, because you can imagine if somebody has either been newly diagnosed, has just had an accident or an injury that's caused what's likely to be a permanent disability, by bringing in early intervention immediately, you may be able to actually reduce the amount of support that somebody might need over their lifetime. So that's got a really important place in this scheme. And in fact, there are two ways, if you like, into the scheme. There are people who've got a stable, permanent disability, that has a significant impact, they will come in. But people who've either been newly diagnosed or have newly acquired a disability can come in under the early intervention requirements. I won't go through that, that's a pretty thing. So before I just get on to this, I'm just going to mention mental illness, because mental illness can be significant and it can be permanent. And perhaps some of you have clients that you help who maybe have a mental illness. In the ACT, it's an area of particular interest, I would say. We're interested in helping people where we can. Certainly, they are included in the scheme. But you would all be aware that for some significant mental illnesses, or psychosocial disabilities it's also called, they are episodic. So people certainly have a diagnosis that will stay with them for life, but they may be ill for periods of time and then they'll have a period of recovery where they are not so ill. So, can the scheme manage this? I'm confident that we can. The planning and assessment process is flexible enough so that if a person comes in at a point in their lives where they are not so ill, but the scheme gets to know them, records them, at a point where they are ill, help could be activated very quickly. And if you think about that in terms of other people who might have a progressive or degenerative disability, so say motor neurone disease might be a good example. So people's needs for support are going to increase over time. So there's no cure for that, and people generally will get worse over time. As a person's need increases for disability support, they need only contact their planner and make a subsequent appointment and further supports can be arranged. The scheme is designed to be that flexible. For most people, they will have a default review date of about 12 months. So this is where their disability is stable, they pretty well know what they need, etc. But if anything happens before that 12 months is up, people can just simply phone up. Yeah, that's right. So it's designed to be like that. So this is the three chunks of the things that you will find in a plan. There is a lot of concentration and emphasis on what people's goals are. So I don't doubt that if you tried to have a conversation with some of your clients about goals, they possibly wouldn't know what you're even talking about, because people with disability have had to struggle so hard to get the support that they need and are often making do with much less than they need. It's very difficult for people to think beyond next week or next month. This is a scheme that's actually encouraging people to think about their long-term goals, and this is something that people with disability have a bit of trouble getting their heads around. So we're not just talking about your needs today or next week or next month. What would you like to be doing in, next year or the year after or in 5 years? So the experience in the 4 trial sites to date is that this has been the hardest thing for people to tackle. It's meant that plan completion rates have taken longer because people have needed time to think about their goals. They've sometimes needed assistance to think about their goals. What is a goal? Well, it's something achievable that you want. That's what a goal is, but it has to be achievable and it has to be something that you want. And so there's been a bit of work going into our trial sites now with people who we know will come into the scheme to get them to think about that in a bit more detail. And so they're a bit prepared when they come in to have their first planning conversation. And there's been a bit of work sponsored by the ACT government around that very thing, around helping people to think more carefully about what it is they want to do. And we'll continue to do that. So with each lot of people who are coming in, I don't know how many more of those capacity building workshops.
Yeah, so probably a few more to go of that particular round, but we'll continue to look on
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
we need to roll it out.
That's right. And we'll be looking at needs here in the ACT. So again, needs are varied across trial sites. If you think about the South Australian context where we've had very young children coming in first, as it turned out, that was quite difficult because parents are often dealing with the grief of having a newly diagnosed child. There's often a lot of medical intervention that happens in those early days to get